Please welcome to the stage, Bill Nye.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Carry on. Woo! People, yes. Greetings. Woo! Woo! Yes. Greetings, Eagles. Oh, people. Yes, we love that song. Yes. Greetings, Eagles. Woo. I was really excited about this until just a couple minutes ago. No, somebody came up to me. Somebody said, "Is Bill Nye your real name?" And I said, "Well, it's William Nye." And he said, "Why did you change it?" Oh man, this is gonna be here for a while. Hi everybody. It's so good to see you. Thank you for including me. It's not supposed to snow later, but if it does, we'll roll with it. I'm just gonna put this in here. Sorry, it's still fresh for me. It's still hilarious. Our story begins. Hey, you guys, everything's great, but can we make the lights dimmer, or the fire marshal? That'll be that. Yeah. Ooh. Take that now. So this is a famous picture. This was a picture of the Earth, but it's also a picture of the moon, and it was taken on the eve of Isaac Newton's birthday, December 24th, 1968. 1968! By astronaut Bill Anders, probably Bill Anders. Since then, people have argued about it, but it was the first, because a bunch of guys were taking pictures. There were 3 people taking pictures. It's really an astonishing picture. The moon's in the foreground, and it's the first time that humankind had this view of the world from this far away. And you see, when you take a picture like this and you set the camera to get the Earth, the stars disappear. And you really get a sense that you're stuck in the blackness of space. There's nothing around us. And furthermore, if you showed this picture to my grandfather, he wouldn't have thought it was real because there'd be too many clouds. People from that era imagined the Earth as looking like a classroom globe if they ever got high enough to see it. But you all, this is routine. We see this picture all the time, on every weather report, every night we get to see this. And by the time my father's generation came along, we had the space program and so on, and people had a more realistic or more complete picture of what I like to call our place in space. So our story begins with my father, shown here. I know, yeah. That's my dad, but it's a picture of my dad. He was three-dimensional. I mean, And I know a lot of you, you're in school, you're doing international relations, you're studying things, but you don't get out much. That's a rock hammer. And then he's then those are rocks there. And as we say, every rock tells a story, and my father was quite the rock hound for quite a while. But under pressure from his father, he was a political science major, but he nevertheless referred to himself, my whole life anyway, as Ned Nye, boy scientist. And he had at least one fantastic idea, and that was to marry this woman. I know. Hey, that's great on the lights, you guys. Thank you. I know, she was hot. Yes. No. So you guys in Washington, you must know people who go to Johns Hopkins, right? They don't even. Okay, I'm sorry. I know. Sorry, I saw I lost you there. I lost a few of you there. What would you be doing if you weren't here? That's right. You'd be watching CSI Greenbelt or something. CSI Rockville. Do they have that yet? It's coming. Anyway, Johns Hopkins is in Baltimore, Maryland. And you see, they haven't even changed the font on the shirt. It's the same as it was in 1939 or what have you. Anyway, he wanted to marry this gal, but her father would not let them get married until she was graduated from college. This is back in, right on, yeah. No, really, back in 1940. So my dad, he started on law school at Johns Hopkins under pressure from his family, but for some reason he didn't like it. You know, most people love law school. They just can't wait to go to law school and spend 3 years in law school. So he had this cool idea to take a job on Wake Island. Now, if you've ever heard of Wake Island, you go to Hawaii and then you go about that far again. And Wake Island is out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, middle of nowhere. If you don't know where you're navigating to that place to which you are navigating, you'll never find it. It's still there, a very small atoll. And at that time, it was so small. How small was it? It was so small. It's going to be, I mean, after the guy with the William thing, it's going to be a while. There was no place to land a plane. Nevertheless, if you were a business person doing business in Asia, you would leave from San Francisco on a flying boat, a seaplane, and you'd fly from there to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Hawaii was not yet a state. By the way, Hawaii is a state now. Okay. If you're born in Hawaii, you were born in the United States. Just so, well, you guys, I understand. I understand the cheering, but that's sort of what nowadays is called fact-based reasoning. Gee, anyway, how much energy and time went into that thing? Okay. Then you would leave Pearl Harbor and fly to Wake Island and refuel there. And ships came and went from Wake Island to leave airplane, aviation gasoline there, high octane gas. And you would land a plane, the seaplane on the ocean, and drive up to a dock and refuel. Now, my father was the college kid, so he was the quartermaster of this construction crew. And reports vary. Some claim absolutely, others are in denial. But this may be my dad standing there in his swimsuit working. And so apparently he kept track of the amount of gas the planes took. So it was a serious business. I mean, except they were on an island and no place to spend money. So my dad was making a lot of money for their nest egg. This was the great vision. And he said it was cool. It was a great summer job. It was always warm. They never had any trouble with fresh water because it rained all the time. They just collect the water and drink it and carry on. And they'd have movies every night. And he said it would rain, but they wouldn't stop playing the movie. It was so warm, they'd just sit outside. And this is cool. Everything was fine in the summer of 1941. But it was fine in the fall of 1941. But for those of you familiar with that era, it was not so great in December of 1941. So it was December 8th on Wake Island because of the international date line, and it was December 7th in Pearl Harbor. Now, we all lived through 9/11 in 2001, and I took this picture this year from an airplane flying over New York City, and those are the twin beams that represent the Twin Towers. And this was catastrophic, and this was traumatic. And most of us back east know somebody who was affected by that, know somebody who worked in the Twin Towers, or know somebody's cousin who worked in the Twin Towers. And it was a tragedy. And it galvanized the United States, and it led to all sorts of historic events. But as my mother described it, on December 7th, 1941, it was as though the world ended. The United States was going to finally have to enter this world conflict, this global conflict, and have to commit all kinds of resources and soldiers, Marines, sailors, the Army Air Corps, and the people back home who supported them. It was just tremendously serious business on December 7th, 1941. And my grandmother kept this paper. The grown-ups here will go on and on with you from time to time about, back in my day, we took the Christmas holidays seriously. Now these kids, when it comes December, it's just all commercial, starts on Halloween. But let me just show you, December 7th, 1941, world ends, and below the fold, 14 shopping days till Christmas. Yes. It's the same. Nothing's new in that regard. But as my mother described it, people on Wake Island were bombed in a coordinated attack with Pearl Harbor, and they were mostly civilians, but there were some Marines and naval officers there, and they fought back. The whole group of them fought back for 2 weeks. They sank some Japanese small ships. They shot down at least 2 Japanese airplanes every day. But eventually the Japanese showed up with a flotilla, Japanese Navy showed up with a flotilla, captured everybody, and my dad and his comrades were captured on Christmas Eve, 1941, and taken to China. And they were in prisoner of war camp for the duration of the war. If you get a chance to be prisoners of war, don't do it. I mean, it sounds really cool, and they make movies. It sounds like it sucked. So if you get a chance, avoid it. Meanwhile, through the dumb luck of the universe, my mother went to Goucher College. Now, anybody familiar with Goucher? Woo! So Goucher used to be in the city of Baltimore. It used to be downtown Baltimore. And in those days, it was when we had such things. It was the sister school to Johns Hopkins. So men went to Hopkins and women went to Goucher. Now, as my mother would describe it, they let boys in. It's gone to hell. But back then, it was all women. And so the dean of students at Goucher College was Dorothy Stimson, who happened to be the first cousin of Henry Stimson, who was the Secretary of War. This was back, everybody, when it was called the Department of War, not the Department of Defense. And I just wonder if things would be different. I'm not sure they would. I just wonder if things would be different if we went back to calling it the Department of War. Like, that's our business, war. That's our business, defense. Really? We defend our oil on the other side of the world. Okay, I'm not sure. I know. It's many of you may disagree, but it's something to think about. Anyway, this is the old days, I guess, before all kinds of government oversight and so on, where Henry Stimson said to Dorothy Stimson, do you have any women that can come work on this thing? I can't tell you what it is. So my mom and several other gals from her college class were recruited to work on the Enigma Code. And this is in the spring of 1942. And you may have heard of the Enigma Code if you saw The Imitation Game. Yeah, I know, very good-looking young man. I have no problem with Keira Knightley. I'm good. But it depicts the story of this guy Turing, who was the mathematician who made these tremendous insights into what you got to do, into what we now call computer science, into how you would construct a code and then deconstruct a code. So my mom and several other gals worked on the Enigma Code, and they were declassified in 1992, 50 years after they were recruited. 50 years. And my nephew, who was a young guy at the time, tried to do a report about his grandmother and her activities in this historic time. And my mom and all the other, they had a big party at Fort Myer across the river. And my mom was like, oh, well, I'd rather not talk about it. Well, it's been 50 years. No, I don't know. There was a big map. That's all I really remember. They were so into secrecy, they just could not, even then, let go. Anyway, I'm not being a bad person, I don't think. I'm not a pig. I'm not a jerk. I'm just being objective here, everybody. I'm just calling them, I think, as anybody would see them. There are the workers, the code breakers, but really, who has the best legs? Okay, I'm just saying. I think right there, that's it. She's got my mom has got the gams. And this is not irrelevant, people, because I think a mental image like this kind of kept my dad going. I'm not joking you, for 4 years. 4 years in prisoner of war camp. Anyway, according to my mom, these guys just disappeared. Nobody knew what happened to them. They were captured. The radios were destroyed the first day. They didn't have the internet. What? Yeah. They didn't have Facebook. There was no Twitter. Yeah. What did they do all day? They got through it. And my dad, apparently, they very seldom had electricity. My dad became fascinated with the night sky, and he could tell you do you know how many traditional constellations are in Western culture? 88, just the same number as keys on a piano keyboard. My dad knew all the constellations, and also he became fascinated with sundials, because they had no clocks or watches. The Japanese military had confiscated them all. And so he came back, he lived through it, and he spent a lot of time with sundials. He developed the sand dial there in the lower left, which you take to the beach so you don't have to get sand in your watch. Oh, Dad, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. Get it? Sand dial? Oh, man. Dad, we are going to make dozens of dollars on this. This is going to be fantastic. And then he wrote articles for the Evening Star and the Washington Post. The Evening Star was a paper in Washington before, when big cities had both the morning and afternoon paper. But then when he wrote his book about sundials, that's when his reputation was greatly enlarged. And he proposed that the Washington Monument be turned into a giant sundial. And we'd have hour lines there in the National Mall, and just visitors from all over the world could come and look at their shoes and determine what time it is. And then in the summertime, the shadow is pretty short compared to the wintertime. If you go down there, you guys, on a sunny day, which is going to be scheduled later next week, you can walk along with the shadow. It moves so fast because the thing is so tall. And in the wintertime, when the sun's low in the sky, the shadow gets very long. And my father pointed out that we will have to move the White House a few blocks, just so everybody can really, reckon time properly. You reach a point in the sundial community where everything that casts a shadow really should be reckoning time, really. Everything that sticks up really should be a sundial, a flagpole, a fire hydrant. Okay, maybe not everything that sticks up, but sorry, my bad. College audience, sorry. Rookie mistake there. Sorry about that. But after he wrote the book about sundials, that's when my father was given a lifetime membership in the North American Sundial Society. Are there any members, NASS members here? Anybody? Really? Right on. Any accounting majors here? Business majors? See, they won't even admit. Yeah, you heard it. Woo. Woo. Yeah. You've been to the accounting major parties? Have you been to those? You know how crazy they get. Footing their columns, writing little macros for their Excel sheets. Well, let me tell you something, people. When you are with the Sundial Association, it is off the hook, man. It is crazy. A bunch of guys standing around, many of them, yes, in Birkenstocks, looking at something. It's moving. Look, the shadow is moving. Oh, by the way, look at this picture. It's a cloudy day. They don't even have a shadow, and they're staring at it. These are my people. All right, so I thought that as a rebellious youth, I was fine. I had not been affected by this sundial silliness, for crying out loud. Like, Dad, you know, we have watches and clocks. Like, you can tell time. Come on. You know. But my family still goes to Delaware in the summer to the beach. Woohoo! Delaware. Woo! Capital Dover. Right on. Anyway, a couple years ago, we were there, and I made a sundial. Just, I couldn't stop myself. Out of a beer carton that I found. I found a beer carton. And anything that's on the table, the surface of the dial, that's not used for telling time is called its furniture. So this is furnished with a local, it's a Delaware beer brand box, and with some sharks and stuff. And the shadow is cast by a bamboo barbecue skewer. And then, so that was one year. Then another year, I found a pizza box. And I made a different type of dial. This is called a polar dial. The angle of the pizza box is the same as your latitude. And then the shadow will go straight across on the equinox. I don't have to tell you that. But the bamboo barbecue skewer now is held up by a couple of wine corks that I found. And there's a thing there in the background. You can see the, oh, hold it. Whoa, Bill. In the background, you can see that there's a sand dial still in service. And the reason this is significant, obviously, is because of our missions to Mars. I mean, I hope I don't have to spell that out, but this is a famous picture. This was taken on July 4th, 1976, as reckoned in the, July 4th is reckoned in the United States. And it's the Viking lander on the surface of Mars. This is the first color picture sent back from the surface of another world. It was at the height of the disco era. And it's both famous because it's the first picture and infamous because it has an issue. The sky on Mars is probably not blue. And there apparently it was a day and a half, and these people at Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California, were talking about it. And I was at an event there, the anniversary of the landing at Caltech, and the couple of the people that were involved back then were there talking about it. And apparently it was like, hey man, I don't think the sky is blue. Well, why not? It's a planet. I know, dude, but it's a different planet. And so apparently they realized this by looking at the shadows. That was one of their clues. The shadows are a little bit blue. And it turns out that if you could go to Mars with the right faceplate on your helmet, wear a helmet, by the way, that's key. The sky is really this color. What is that color? That color is, it's a pale orange, a salmon. I don't really think it's an ecru. It's eggshell. You know where they sell women's stockings? It's in the upper right on that rack of stockings. I don't wear women's stockings. I'm a huge fan, but I don't wear them. Anyway, the thing of it is, if you look again at the pizza box sundial, there in the background, by the way, there's a Mars dial, a sand dial rather, still in service. Look at that, still works. 51 years old, still casts a shadow, even if you're not looking at it. But look closely at the shadow on the white surface of the pizza box. They're furnished with colored pencils. And I think you can see that not only is the shadow gray, the shadow has a little bit of a bluish tint. And that color comes from the Earth's sky. So the light on the surface of the Earth on a sunny day is not just from the sun, it's from the sky. Now I know there are artists, there are photographers here who are picking up what I'm laying down, who are hip to what I'm saying. But most of us go through our whole lives Being able to people who are able-bodied, who are sighted, people can tell the difference between daylight and room light right away, but most of us cannot cannot put our finger on why the two light sources look different. But a big part of it is this blue light that comes from the sun. Now, we did not have a word for this bluish tint in English, so I made one up. Cirrulescence. Cirrulescence. For the tinge of blue. Come on. It's a great, come on. Now if you're not sure, but we already have the word viridescence, the tinge of, well, we have a word, I made it up, it's in print, there it is, cirrulescence. And this became significant for me when I was invited to a meeting about the Mars rovers, the two rovers that came to be called Spirit and Opportunity. And I was at this meeting in Ithaca, New York, at Cornell. And right on, Big Red, go Big Red, yep. There were all kinds of engineering drawings on this big table. And then they had this picture of this thing. And I didn't want to look stupid or stupider. So I didn't say anything for a while. But after a few minutes, I just was like, you guys, what is this thing? What is this thing? Oh, Bill, that's your photometric calibration target. That's what that is. It's a stick. What do you mean? It's a photometric No, it's a test pattern for the cameras. So point the camera at this device, and there are these silicone rubber coupons, they call them, that they found by trial and error that if you bake them, if you cook them, get them hot and cold, their pigment stabilizes after a while. They stop fading. Those are the colors. Those are the secondary colors. There's cyan, magenta, and yellow. And then there's a stick casting a shadow. And this is in the thermal vacuum chamber, TVAC. It's an oven. It's like an oven. And it has a light bulb, very similar to the light bulb and oven you might have at home. And it's casting a shadow. And I think if you look at that shadow, maybe especially in this light, you can see it has a yellowish tint. And you only really are aware of that yellowish tint if you're looking at the shadow. And the Mars photographers on this mission, 25 years after the Viking missions, realized this, and they were willing to take a metal stick all the way to Mars to do nothing but cast a shadow. Now, we did not have a word for this in English, so I once again was compelled to make up a word for the yellowish tint, xanthidescence. Yeah, starts with an X. Come on, people. It's sexy. It's good. Come on. But after a few minutes, I was in this meeting looking at this metal stick casting a shadow. And I was like jumping out of my chair. You guys, we can make the photometric calibration target into a sundial. Come on. And they're looking at me like, Bill, really, it's the space program, dude. We don't tell time with sundials, Bill. I see you're wearing a watch. No, it'll be cool. Come on, we can reckon time on another world. It's like those guys who speak Klingon. Except it'll be real. I see one guy, sir, Klingons, that's not real. Sorry. No, we'll cover it later. It's good. Don't worry about it. It's good. So anyway, a couple days went by, and the head guy, the principal investigator, the PI, Steve Squires, says, okay. So you guys, there are 3 sundials on Mars. This is Husband Hill, named after one of the guys killed in the Columbia Space Shuttle wreck. And if you look down in the lower right, there it is. We spell it all one word, Mars dial. They're casting a shadow. And if you look at them up close, there's the one from Spirit in the lower left and the one from Curiosity in the upper right. I think you can see the color of the Martian sky in the shadow. We did not have a word for this. So there I was again, rongedescence. The rongedescence of the Martian sky. And so the thing is, the geologists are crazy for what color the rocks are. Are there any geologists here? Anybody right on? And you'll recognize them. They walk around like this, just very excited, and they'll come back, look. And you go to his dorm room or his class or whatever, and then just a lot of rocks. Yeah. Oh, but this one's different. Yeah, okay, man. And so on Mars, it's rust-colored, the whole thing. And it's really an amazing thing. This little stick casts a shadow. And the reason the post is that big around and so on is to get enough pixels in shadow. Now, I want to reassure you, taxpayers and voters, after I was invited to that meeting and I got involved in the thing, I did do a little work. I'm a mechanical engineer. I did the analysis on the gnomon. The gnomon is the part of a sundial that casts the shadow. So the gnomon casts a shadow on the table, which is furnished with whatever you like to inspire the future. The Spirit and Opportunity rovers say, the Curiosity rover says, to Mars to explore. Okay, it's a motto, okay. But the Spirit and Opportunity rovers say, 2 worlds, 1 sun. Ooh. Ooh. Anyway, I did the vibration analysis on the gnomon, and it's indestructible. It's made of aircraft aluminum. You could tow a truck with it and so on. But last year, somebody sent me this picture. And then I realized it was April 1st. Oh, you kids with your Photoshop, you're just so funny. But just whoever did it, just rest assured, you almost killed me. It turned out to be this guy named Doug Ellison who works at Jet Propulsion Office. Ha, 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 ha. So how many people saw The Martian? Sure. There's a movie poster and they got the sky pretty much the right color. But I hope you're as troubled as I am by this. It says 140 million miles away. I mean, look, if you mean 225 million kilometers, just say that. Crying out loud, are you trying to confuse us all? It's ancient. I hope someday we're on the metric system, okay? I hope. The metric system's getting applause, right on. Go Eagles. So, no, it is happening. It is happening organically. Everybody knows what a liter of Coke is and so on. And we run our races in meters and we swim our laps in meters. It's coming. But this is a picture taken by the Sojourner rover in 1997. And the following data were taken by that rover. The Martian atmospheric pressure is 0.7% of the Earth's atmospheric pressure. That's why if you ever read or see The Martian, the opening sequences wouldn't happen that way. There's not enough pressure. For those of you who haven't read it and seen it, just roll with it, okay? It's science fiction. But anyway, also at this time, the instruments on this rover took these data, and this is a comparison of the Martian atmosphere with Earth's atmosphere. It has nitrogen, argon, oxygen, krypton, xenon, but at the top is carbon dioxide. Now, everybody here was alive, maybe a few of you weren't alive, when that top number, which is 0.03%, which is the same as 300 parts per million, rounded to 1 digit, is now 0.04%. 400 parts per million. Happened last year, or year before last. We got to 400 parts per million. And this tiny change in what seems like a tiny fraction of the Earth's atmosphere is changing everything for you and future generations. And the reason this is happening, the reasons this is happening are twofold, or 2 reasons. The first one is what I like to call reason number 1. And that is, this is a picture taken from the International Space Station. The first reason is the Earth's atmosphere is thin. You might think at first that this picture's out of focus. It's not out of focus. It's the blurriness is the Earth's atmosphere. And that's the whole thing. It's held there by gravity. If we had some extraordinary car on some extraordinary ladder road and this is our ladder car, could somehow drive straight up at highway speeds, well, on Route 95, okay, but regular highway speeds, you'd be in outer space in an hour. On Route 95, it'd be 3 hours, but you'd get there. It's right there, and it's so thin you hardly notice it unless you get up close. Now, the other reason, which I call reason number 2, has to do with us. When I was a young guy, we went to the World's Fair in New York City, New York. The town's so nice, they named it twice. Go New York. We're in Washington. Nationals, Mets, I'm okay. I'm dealing. But we just missed it. My family, they had a total board. The United Nations had a totalizer board of the number of humans, estimated number of humans on Earth. And we just missed it changing, maybe by 4 hours, from 2,999,999,000 people in the world to 3 billion people. We just missed it changing to 3 billion. Well, as of this afternoon, I got on the electric internet, and the world's population is now about 7.3 billion people. So in my lifetime, it has more than doubled, substantially more than doubled, almost 1 1/3 as many people as were alive, more people as were alive when I was a kid. It's 4 times as many people as when my dad was a kid, 5 times as many people as when my grandparents were around. So these two things, the thin atmosphere and the extraordinary number of us trying to breathe it and burn it, is changing everything. Last year was the warmest year on record. Now, these data are from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. These are what we would call fact-based. They're not from a website that is off the beaten track. This is your tax dollars at work. These are scientists reporting the data as they record them. By the way, 2016 will probably be a little cooler because it will not have the El Nino superimposed on the human-caused warming. But nevertheless, 2016 will almost certainly be one of the hottest of the last 10 years. It will be one of the hottest of the decade. With that said, maybe a few of you heard about this debate I did in Kentucky. Whew, yes, right on. I went to Petersburg, Kentucky, and I interacted with a guy who says, near as I can tell, he seems to believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old, which it isn't, but he holds to it, and as of this afternoon, it had over 5.1 million views. Thank you, yes. And by the way, that's the official site. It's probably 3 or 4 times that many at all the unofficial sites. And the reason I mention this is because, are you telling me that here in the 21st century, in the most advanced society, technologically advanced society, you can make an argument for Japan and New Zealand, okay, but there's a lot of people in the US, technologically advanced society. You're telling me there are 5 million people who don't accept evolution as the fundamental idea in all of life science? Like, dude, this could be a very serious problem, not for the people who claim they believe this stuff, but for the kids that are in their school systems. And don't worry, the next morning, this was all over the internet, Bill Nye, science lie, yes. If Bill Nye weren't here, everything would be fine for us, yeah. And I mention it because even shooting the messenger is not going to help you in this case. The Earth is not 6,000 years old. And consistent with this, Ken Ham is an adamant climate change denier. We'll say the Earth is now cooling. And unique to the United States, we have a whole bunch of these people. We have Senator Inhofe from Oklahoma. He's a senator. Sarah Palin. We have this gal from Tennessee, Coal State. We have the governor of Wisconsin and the governor of Florida, who the governor of Florida will not permit his staff to use the word climate change in public, the phrase climate change in public. Dude. So I went to Florida, and I met the reporters who were in the press conference when he made this assertion, "You shall not say this phrase." And we met the city engineer from Miami Beach, who's made it the city ordinance in Miami Beach that when you have a place of business in certain neighborhoods, you have to have all your electrical outlets and light switches so that they can be moved up twice as the ocean comes into the first floor. And they re-pour, is the verb, a new concrete floor in these certain retail businesses in this one very popular neighborhood. So the city engineer is doing that, and meanwhile his governor is like, no, it's not happening. And so why is this? I ask myself. What is it about somebody in the state of Florida, of all places, who would be in such strong denial about the situation? And so a lot of studies have been done, you may have heard about it, that liberal brains are different from conservative brains. This may or may not be true. It seems a little bit like a Just So story to me, but nevertheless it is interesting. The claim is, as I understand it, that as progressive political people get more and more educated, they become more and more open to the idea that climate change is happening and all sorts of other ideas. As deeply conservative people get more and more education, they just find new, complicated ways to justify their insistence that things like climate change aren't happening. Now, I don't know if that's true. It's a reasonable premise, but I've read the papers and I can't quite tell. With that said, there is extraordinarily complex systems have been set up to fund climate change denial and make that render the dollars very difficult to track. And the latest, most notorious incident, at least in my point of view, was the revealing that in 1977, Exxon Corporation, before it was ExxonMobil, had some scientists on the staff, petroleum people, who said, hey man, if we keep this up, we're going to be warming the world. And those scientists and engineers were let go, laid off, induced to move on. This was in 1977. So I mentioned this to you because this is a turning point. We are at what Dean Starr called a crossroads. And appreciate that it's significant today. Climate change is expensive. It's costing us money. When you have floods in South Carolina and people, their homes are destroyed, and you have to deploy emergency services, law enforcement and the military to distribute water and food, that's bad. In Wisconsin this year, day before yesterday, this last weekend, they have a tradition of parking cars on the ice on Lake Geneva. Well, this year, a dozen cars sank into the lake, and they're ruined. So this is something you want to avoid in the coming years. So you could, when faced with the crisis of climate change, you could run in circles screaming, but that has proven to be ineffective. So I would like you all to consider a different path, a different type of range d'essence, and I want you to, dare I say it, change the world. Now, right on. Let us consider just one example. Let us take Kentucky. An organization that I'm getting involved with called the Solutions Project has done this very careful analysis over the last 10 years or so. And we believe that we have demonstrated that every state in the United States and the provinces of Canada could be powered entirely renewably without building any new nuclear power plants. And this is perhaps an extraordinary claim, but the analysis has been very diligent and careful. And so in the state of Kentucky, they have now about 20,000, maybe 18,000 coal-related jobs. In West Virginia, there are all in about 30,000 jobs. And so people run in circles screaming about these jobs. 30,000 jobs is a lot of jobs. But if you live in Kentucky, you might be a Panthers fan. You might be a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, because it's not that far away. If you go to Three River Stadium, there are 70,000 people every weekend. Yes, 30,000 is a lot of jobs, but there's twice that many at every football game, for crying out loud. Like, it's not all that many. And our claim at the Solutions Project is if we converted those jobs to renewable energy jobs, wind turbines, installation of photovoltaics, the manufacture of photovoltaics, you would have 140,000 new jobs that cannot be outsourced. You cannot send the rigging of electrical transmission lines to China because they have to be here. Am I going too fast for you? They have to be in the US. You can't send them elsewhere. So just today, if you're scoring along with us, the Supreme Court, you'll be shocked to learn, voted 5-4 to prevent the administration's effort to curtail coal-fired power plant emissions. In other words, the Supreme Court stopped the effort to stop them. So coal-fired power plants can keep going. The legislators from West Virginia are celebrating this, keeping these great jobs going, and how great it is that the administration is not allowed to tamp down this important source of income for Kentucky and West Virginia. But on the other hand, this is sort of the worst thing possible, to continue to burn coal and put carbon dioxide at an extraordinary rate in the atmosphere. So I want you all to change the world. Not this weekend, but this year. Now, you could say quite reasonably that this is an impossible task, to change our energy infrastructure, which has been constructed over the last couple centuries, to this new renewable setup where we have wind turbines and photovoltaics, some geothermal, and some tidal energy running the United States and Canada. By the way, the big untapped resource, half the US population lives in the Eastern time zone. The big untapped resource is wind energy off the East Coast. And I know there are people who say, well, it's going to block our view. Okay, does anybody, sorry, it's none of my business, but anybody get involved in that in Massachusetts? Wind turbines are going to block our view. Okay, they're this big, and they're 7 miles away. And if you've ever been there or been to Delaware or the Jersey Shore, or the Jersey Shore, when do people get excited? I mean, besides here, when there's a ship going, but wow, look, something's moving. And if there were wind turbines way out there and you had binoculars, they'd be moving all the time. It'd be fun. And you wouldn't have this problem of the world getting warmer and warmer. Furthermore, the United States could export this technology. We could make the best wind turbines in the world, the best photovoltaic systems in the world, the best energy source systems in the world, and then everybody would win. Now, when people say this sort of big change is impossible, I hearken again to my own family. My father's dad, my mother's dad was, you'll be shocked to learn, my mother's dad was a chemist. Crazy. And he was in World War I. He put a gas mask on himself and a gas mask on his horse. And apparently the horse gas mask didn't have eyes. The horses had to walk around in the gas. It's very bad. But you guys, 20 years later, when the extended dance mix of that conflict of World War I became World War II, nobody who was serious about conducting a war did it on a horse. You crazy? We're not going to go into battle on horses. No, we've got tanks and jeeps and airplanes. Everything changes. Our entire transportation infrastructure changed in just 20 years. Revolutionized. So don't tell me we can't do it. Those people didn't even have the internet. How did they communicate? They had to write memos with typewriters, for crying out loud. Who's got that kind of time? Everything changed. And so, as you may know, people like my parents were called the greatest generation. Both of my parents are interred at Arlington Cemetery across the river. They were called the greatest generation because they all got together and solved this huge global problem. People went to work in factories, building airplanes and jeeps and tanks as fast as they could. In fact, I don't know if you noticed, the president's mom worked on B-17s in Wichita, Kansas. She was one of the Rosie the Riveters. Everybody got involved. These posters are from that generation. I want you guys to be the next great generation. I want you to, dare I say it, change the world. I mean, you guys, in those days, they had people collecting bones, tying them up and leaving them for the bone collector so they could take the calcium to make adhesives for the rubber parts on airplanes. Everybody got together. The songs, the swing era music, so much of it was about winning the war. Flying home, that's like flying home after dropping bombs. Oh, cool. Look at those gobs doing their jobs, keeping the sea lanes free. Look at those guys up in the skies winging to victory. Everything was about the war. Just think, if we can get Meghan Trainor and Mark Ronson to get into making music about solving climate change, we could change the world. Now, along this line, you guys, I know this has been a little heavy. Serious biz, but I want to talk about something else that's very important to me. You all, how many of you are in college at American University? Yes, a few of you? Oh, good. Oh, that's good. You're living at an extraordinary time, and you will have professors. You will have people you meet here that will change your life forever. I guarantee it. And I very much hope it changes your life for the better. So, when I was in college, I was in engineering school. I took one class from Carl Sagan. He's a famous astronomer. I really don't know how I got into that school, and I'm really not clear on how I got into the class, but it happened. And in those days, he would go on the Tonight Show quite regularly. Before Jimmy Fallon, before Jay Leno, it was Johnny Carson. And Carl Sagan, was telling Johnny Carson about this spacecraft that would be pushed through space by sunlight. And wouldn't this be a cool thing? And in those days, everybody, we had problems. We were recovering from the Vietnam War. Inflation was at 14, your house mortgage would be at 14% interest, not 3%. And people were very concerned about what the Soviet Union was going to do, and nuclear weapons were being built. Nevertheless, Carl Sagan and other people in the space community had this optimistic view of the future. That while we are solving these problems here on Earth, we got to solve these, we've got to keep exploring space and solve the mysteries of the cosmos. And so Carl Sagan and two other guys started the Planetary Society in 1980. This is right as disco was giving way to the important work of of Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols and punk, okay, and new wave and so on. He started the Planetary Society, and I had been graduated, so I guess I got on the mailing list. And this is, they would send a paper. It was a technology used for storing information. They'd send, it was thin, and you could fold it up. And then if you held it up, it was just like a computer screen, but really thin. And you could read it. You couldn't Zoom or anything. But anyway, I joined the Planetary Society, and I remained a member. Then, because of the success of this Science Guy show, I was asked to be on the board of the Planetary Society. And in the year 2000, we went to Barbara Mikulski's office, who was a senator from Maryland. And there is Lou Friedman, who was an engineer at Jet Propulsion Lab, who, along with Carl Sagan, and a guy named Bruce Murray, who was the head of the Jet Propulsion Lab when the Viking missions landed on Mars and when the Voyager missions were launched for the Grand Tour of the Solar System. By the way, that was the first Grand Tour of the Solar System, launched in 1977. You know, they could have done it during the Thomas Jefferson administration. The planets were lined up, but nothing. They didn't. They just let it go. It's weird. But then up there in the left-hand side of the picture is James Cameron, who turns out to be a big space advocate. He's quite a science person. And so we were talking to Barbara Mikulski. We had 10,000 postcards from members of the Planetary Society, people from around the world who just thought it was cool and wanted to send a mission to Pluto. She voted for it. And it was built right here in Greenbelt, Maryland at the Applied Physics Lab, which is run by Johns Hopkins. And it took 6 years to build the spacecraft. I went to Cape Canaveral January 19th in 2006. It was the fastest rocket ever to leave the Earth. It was faster than any of the Apollo missions. The Apollo guys, the people who went to the moon, took about 2.5 days on the largest rocket ever built. Saturn V, took about 2.5 days to get to the moon. The New Horizons spacecraft, which is a relatively low-mass spacecraft on a relatively huge rocket, went past the orbit of the moon in 9 hours. It got a gravitational assist from the orbital motion of Jupiter. It got a little whoosh from Jupiter, except it's in space. There's no sound. A little around Jupiter. And then on Bastille Day, on the 14th of July this year, we got this extraordinary picture from Pluto. Right on. So, no matter how you feel about Pluto's status, it is an amazing place. And it was our intellect and treasure of a society that thought this was a worthy undertaking. While we're dealing with all these other problems, providing renewable electricity, clean water to everybody, getting the internet to everyone on Earth, while we're doing those problems, we continue to explore space. Space exploration brings out the best in us. It's inherently optimistic. And that's why, at another board meeting of the Planetary Society, you guys all know Neil Tyson, right? Anyway, he's on the board, he's still on the board. And I don't know if you noticed, he's really into wine. And and something happened. Now I'm the CEO of the Planetary Society. I'm not clear how that went down. But this year, through the support of people like you, we were able to launch our solar sail. 39 years after Professor Sagan was talking about it on national or maybe even international television. Well, thank you, and I know there's probably a few members here, Planetary Society members. We love you, man, woman. Thank you for your support, but it's this optimistic view of the future that space brings to us. And we solve problems that have never been, humankind solves problems that have never been solved before when we explore space. So while we are dealing with climate change, while we are providing for disadvantaged people, providing clean water to people in parts of the world that don't have it, providing a source of reliable food to everybody in the world. While we're doing all that, there's some extraordinary things happening. You all were here on Earth around Halloween when scientists and engineers at NASA and the European Space Agency and the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency and Roscosmos in Russia got together and decided, you know what, for sure, water flows on Mars. Liquid water flows on Mars. It happens every Martian summer. By the way, a Martian summer is quite cool. If you go there to Mars, you really want to keep warm. A summer day right at the surface, it might be 0 degrees Celsius. What's that, 32 Fahrenheit in the ancient units. And then here, it'd be 20 below, and here it's 40 below because the atmosphere is so thin. Nevertheless, apparently there is some extraordinary type of super salty ice that exists under the Martian sand, the soil, the regolith as it's called, and from time to time water flows down these crater walls. The craters weep. And we have the Curiosity rover on Mars right now. It's been sitting there for 3.5 years in the most sterilizing environment anybody can think of, ultraviolet light on Mars. It's very reasonable that we could drive that rover up to one of these weeping crater walls and look closely. My friends, if we discover evidence of life on another world, it will utterly change this one. It will change the way each and every one of us feels about being a living thing in the cosmos. It will change the way everybody feels about being alive. It will change the way we feel about what I like to call our place in space. Because there are two questions that we have all asked. And if you meet somebody who says he or she has not asked these questions, they're lying to you. They're lying to you. Where did we come from? And are we alone in the universe? And if you want to answer those two questions, you have to explore space. So if you all go to Mars and you walk up to the Curiosity rover, Spirit rover, Opportunity rover, you will see the Mars dials, one of the Mars dials. And if you go to the Smithsonian, let's see, did I get this? You go to the Smithsonian, when the Mars exhibit is reestablished, the Mars dials, there's one on each rover. The Mars exhibit is being reestablished at the Air and Space Museum. You can see the flight spare, as it's called, of the Mars dial. And around the edge, along with the motto, 2 worlds, one sun, around the edge in very small letters is a message to the future. Now, this is like throwing a bottle in the ocean with a message in it. You guys, when you put a message, how many people have done that? Put a message in a bottle, thrown it in the ocean? Thank goodness, somebody. When you do that, the most likely outcome is it will sink and become more ocean trash. Thank you. But it's reasonable that one of these things will find its way to Portsmouth, England, or Chengdu, China. And somebody will pick it up and go, cool, a message from the U.S. I like M&Ms too, or whatever. You know, it'll be fantastic. But mostly when you write that message, it's for you. It's to reflect on how you feel. And so it is with these Mars rovers. It says we built these spacecraft in our year, this one would be 2011. It arrived here in 2012. We built these instruments to study the Martian environment, to learn about Mars' past, prepare for our future, to look for signs of water and life. And then it says in very small letters, it says, to those who visit here, we wish a safe journey and the joy of discovery. And that, my friends, is the essence of science. That is the essence of being a human, is to feel that joy of discovery. And if you meet people who don't feel the joy of discovery, they're lying to you. Everybody's felt that, whether it's bumblebees, oatmeal, or Uptown Funk. Everybody has felt that. And our ancestors who do not feel that are not really our ancestors. They got outcompeted by our ancestors who did feel it. And it's the process of science that has enabled all of this. Everything you see here, everything in this room came out of somebody's head. In general, it was an engineer. Even if there's some potted plants someplace. They were brought in here by people who cultivated those plants, who understood the science of them. Now, as you may know, I went to school here in Washington, D.C. And right on, I went to Lafayette Elementary. And I did. What do you laugh? It's Lafayette Elementary. And I had some extraordinary experiences there. This picture was released going on 2 years ago when Carl Sagan's papers were put into the Library of Congress. There was a big party, and the Cassini spacecraft team submitted this picture along with his letters, because he would have been strongly in support of this mission, and it's extraordinary. The spacecraft is below what humans call the South Pole of Saturn. I don't know what the Saturnians call it, if there are any of them. And it's looking up through the rings, and they're illuminated by sunlight. It's just a beautiful picture, but it's also a picture of the Earth. The Earth is right there. Now, if we could travel that way, about 100,000 kilometers, which in space travel is nothing. That's a day at the Space Travel Office. Here's the same view of the same solar system from about the same perspective. And do you see us there? That's us, right there. That's the Earth. That's everybody you've ever met. And I first got a perspective on this in 3rd grade when Mrs. Cochran told us there are more stars in the sky than grains of sand on the beach in Delaware or New Jersey or Virginia Beach or North Carolina or South Carolina. No. And I remember thinking, I mean, I wouldn't have expressed it this way. I remember thinking, Mrs. Cochran, that's extraordinary. Mrs. Cochran, that for me is incredible. Mrs. Cochran, are you high? There's no way. Lady, have you ever been to a beach? For crying out loud, there is nothing but sand, okay? You look that way, 1,500 nautical miles, and there's sand. That way, 2,000 miles, there's sand. The tide goes out even a little bit, there's more sand. You look behind you, there's sand. You shuffle your feet, there's sand. You're a little kid and you dig a big hole, there's sand. People get this. There are about 1,000 times more stars that we can see than grains of sand on the Earth. Do, 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 do. Like Mrs. Cochran was underestimating it by an enormous fraction. So I started to feel pretty insignificant. Now this sundial thing was around, the shadows, and I remember thinking, well, what if the astronauts would look right across the Earth? Would they see me there on the beach doing this? Hey, astronauts? The answer is no. No flippin' way. Look at that. You cannot see little Bill waving his arms. I'm sorry, man. So I started to feel pretty insignificant. I started to feel like nothing. I started to feel that I was no different from a grain of sand. I'm just another grain. I'm just another speck of sand. And when you look at it from this point of view, the Earth is a speck in the cosmos. I'm a speck standing on a bunch of specks, which are part of a speck, that orbits the sun, which is a completely unremarkable star. It's just another star. It's just another speck. I'm a speck on a speck, orbiting a speck with a bunch of other specks in the middle of specklessness. I suck. I'm nothing. But with my brain, with your brain, which is only this big, in the case of my old boss, of course, it must have been quite a bit smaller, but with your brain, you can imagine all of this. With your brain, you can know it. You can know your place in space. And with your brains, my friends, we can work together and understand science and understand the cosmos and understand the Earth's ecosystems. Understand how we produce electricity and who needs it, and how we produce clean water and provide it to everybody, and how we can, working together, dare I say it, change the world. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Woo! Thank you. Oh, you guys. Oh, cool. Thank you guys. Oh, wow, this is great. Oh, I love you guys. Oh. All right, wait. Okay, hold on. All right. Wait. You've been doing this all night. I've watched you. Okay, hang on. Woo! American University Eagles! Woo! Thank you guys. Thank you. Woo! God, that was fun. Thank you. Are there any questions on what we've covered so far? Wait, there's a whole bunch of questions. Valeria, where are you? You have questions.
Hey, Bill, unfortunately, I don't think
Yes.
we have time for questions except for one.
Say again?
We have time for one question.
We got time. We got all night, girlfriend. Come on up.
Here's a question from the
my
President
esteemed
of Women in
colleague,
Science, Valerie Reynolds, class of 2016. What is your favorite science demo?
Favorite science demo. My favorite science demonstration. Now look, you guys. I don't know how many of you have big plans to become dancers on Broadway. Anybody? Yeah, sure. I mean, why not? Okay. If you do that, I encourage you, don't ever say who your favorite dance partner is. Because then they're going to think you don't want to dance with these other guys who might be, fantastic, lovely guys. So I cannot say that I have a favorite science demonstration. However, every single time, I'm not kidding you, I put vinegar in a bottle, put baking soda in a balloon, put the balloon carefully on then shake it, and it fills me with joy. Every time. Get the rubber, get a balloon, put water in it. I don't know if you're familiar with this technology of making water balloons. I mean, you're in college, I hope, okay? Then you can make one that's about the size of an egg, and then get a glass juice bottle, get a swatch of paper, usually the 1/8 of a piece of notebook paper or letter paper, light it, drop it in the bottle, put the balloon on top, and it'll as the hot gas goes by. And then when the fire goes out, that moment the fire goes out, there's fewer molecules inside the bottle than there were in the atmospheric pressure. Pushes it. It just fills me with joy every time. Every time. Oh, this is good. Good. Now that I've tried it, I don't think I can live without it. Yes. One more. You go for it.
Okay, one more question. What do you believe is the best way to communicate complex science topics to the public? India Novell, class of 2018.
What's the best way to communicate complex science ideas to the public? Like this. No, everybody. We want everybody to be scientifically literate. We don't need help us. We do not need everybody to be a scientist. I can tell you from long experience, you don't want everybody to be an engineer. I can tell you. But we want everybody to be literate enough to evaluate progress in science and claims about science and our understanding of nature through the process of science. On Thursday, whoever they are, at the LIGO experiment, let's see, Laser Interferometry Gravitational Wave Observatory, are going to report whether or not they've observed a gravity wave. Gravity waves, everything else travels as a wave or a particle. Light, if you do experiments to detect waves, you get waves. You do experiments to detect particles, you get particles. So people have postulated that maybe there are gravitons that transmit gravity, and maybe they also have a wave nature. So the scientific community set up these enormous beams of laser light that go over extraordinary distances, very, 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 very accurately calibrated. And if a gravity wave passed through these beams, you would expect them to go, and then that would validate more about astrophysics, or the natural extension of relativity, and we would know more about the cosmos. So, by the way, I've often speculated that since there is all this dark matter, about 5 times as much dark matter as there is observable matter, maybe there are darkons, particles of dark, that have some darkonic characteristics. And these are discovered, they'll be an extraordinary source of energy. Okay, hit me. It's got to be the big finale question. This is going to be great. This is going to be amazing.
Okay. Do you have... Oh, no. What are you most passionate about at the moment? Becky Rodriguez, class of 2016.
What do you think about what? What am I most passionate about? None of your business. Science! The best idea we've ever had. Carry on, Eagles. Thank you so much for including me. Let's change the world. Thank you all. Woo! I love you guys. Thanks, you guys. Good night. Good night.